Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are excited to have you here. So today we are going to be hosting a quick Q&A and grant proposal development workshop related to our Partnerships for Innovative Research in Africa grant program. We recently launched this call, and we are excited to receive some strong applications after today's session. So let's get into the agenda. So today we are together for 2 hours. We're going to start with a welcome and overview from Tony Malanzi, our Assistant Director in the Africa Office, and a quick overview of the PIRA grant program from Amy Jameson, Co-Director from the US Office. Then we are going to get into a proposal development session with Derek Tobias, following a research communication and engagement portion from Abraham Lamela, a budget section from Kara Lochitz, and then finally we're going to have a Q&A for all of our panelists at 9 a.m. So with that, I will pass it over to Tony to give us our welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Tony Milanzi, and I'm the Assistant Director at the AAP, based out of the Lilongwe office in Malawi. So on behalf of AAP management, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on this PIRA strategic funding program. We are happy to that you could join us to explore the various aspects of our call for proposals. We're hoping that even if you are a seasoned grant writer or new to this world of proposals, we're hoping that you will find valuable insights and practical tips that will enhance your proposal development process. My small task this afternoon is just to introduce you to the AAP, what the consortium is all about, and what it stands for, and what it is that we are trying to achieve in our programs. So just to get started with the slides. The next slide, please. Yes. So the AAP is a consortium of 12 institutions, so 11 universities, and a network of agricultural policy institutes is called ANAPRI. And then we have universities, 10 universities in Africa: Egerton, Luana, Makerere, United States International University in Kenya, UCAD in Senegal, University of Leaders in Bamako, University of Botswana, University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, University of Nigeria in Nsukka, and then University of Pretoria. In the US, we have the Michigan State University, MSU. As I was intimating, we have 2 offices, one out of here in Lilongwe, where I am, and also another one at, on the campus of Michigan State University in East Lansing. And the slide you're looking at is some of the staff that we have. We have our 3 co-directors, 2 based in the East Lansing office, and 1 based here in Lilongwe. And then you can see the rest of the staff there. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as a consortium, our vision is to transform lives through co-created, research-driven initiatives that address shared challenges. And our mission is to initiate and support innovative, sustainable, and equitable partnerships among African institutions, MSU, and other collaborators. We are guided by 5 principles: accountability, equity, inclusivity, sustainability, and transparency. And we have 3 pillars that guide our approach to the work that we do. The first one is building bridges, and by that we simply mean bringing organizations together to work towards common goals. And this we're talking about universities, research institutes, governments, private sector, and what have you. The other pillar is transforming institutions. So we work with institutions to enhance or strengthen their capacity to enter into these equitable and sustainable partnerships. The other pillar is transforming lives. And by this, we simply mean we want to be practical. We want to do research that will translate into impacts, into changes, into lives on the African continent and also beyond. We have 7 priority areas. There could be more coming, but as of now, we have agri-food systems, we have water, energy, and the environment, we have culture and society, youth empowerment, education, health and nutrition, and then we have science, technology, and innovation. So this is the new one that I talked about. Next slide, please. Right. So we have several ways to you can get in touch with us from the Africa office. We also have colleagues at the East Lansing office that you can email. But we also have an online platform. It's called The Bridge, where you can connect with other researchers within the consortium and beyond. So thank you so much, and again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Tony. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, go ahead, Justin. You can
I was just going to
lead
pass
us
it
in.
over to you. So thank you, Tony, for
Great.
those welcoming remarks. And next up, I wanted to introduce Dr. Amy Jameson, who will be giving us an overview of the PIRA grant program.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Tony, for framing our discussion today. My job is just to give you a bit of an overview of this particular opportunity and sort of the context and the goals that we're planning to achieve through the PIRA program. If you could go to the next slide, please. Yep. So our Partnerships for Innovative Research in Africa grant program is designed to cultivate and support multi-directional collaborative research partnerships. This is the partnership in the Alliance for African Partnership name. So this is one of the mechanisms that we use to catalyze those types of partnerships. This is the second time we're running the PIRA program. We had a precursor to the PIRA program, which we called the Strategic Partnership Grants in 2017. We ran a round of PIRA in 2021, which just closed out now. They had a bit of delays because of COVID and coming out of COVID. And so those are just wrapping up now. And now we're launching this program again. We just launched it in March 11th when we opened the call. So teams under this program, teams are expected to cultivate equitable partnerships from conception to closeout of the project. And I think this is a really important piece to point out. We are hoping that you'll be able, we're giving a lead time up to August for the proposal. And we're hoping that teams will be able to create the project that they're working on together and build that partnership from that creation phase. We don't want to just have a team who has a researcher who develops the whole program and then just put someone else's name on it. That's not the point of the program, and we hope to see that demonstrated in proposals that there is an equitable partnership from conception to close out of the project. We also would love to see projects that involve local stakeholders and that take an adaptive approach responsive to the local context in which they propose to work. There are 2 tiers of funding. First are planning grants up to $50,000. Second are scaling grants up to $100,000. Next slide. Speaking a little bit about the eligibility, who can apply and who are eligible to be on teams. The minimum for a team would include a PI from MSU and an AAP African member institution. And so each team must include that to be eligible, both those 2 people. But teams can include other partners. This is other institutions globally. private sector, government, civil society organizations, and Pan-African global institutions are also welcome to be on the proposal as a team member, or to have a PI from those partners, as long as they have a PI from MSU and an AAP African member. We also wanted to point out that individuals who are PIs or co-PIs on grants from previous rounds of PIRA and AAP's 2017 strategic partnership grants are not eligible to lead proposals, but they may participate as team leaders. If you have had another funding opportunity through AAP, which is not PIRA or our strategic partnership grants, you are eligible to lead a PIRA proposal. But those who have received funding under this program before are not eligible to lead a team. Also, just a quick mention, MSU ISP staff are not eligible to lead proposals. They may be on teams of proposals, but they are not eligible to lead. Next slide. What is needed to apply? And Derek will get into this in more detail in his section of the presentation. But just to quickly point out that we require an application form, which is completed online through a Qualtrics form that you link to on our website. We'll gather names, institutional affiliations, and titles of all PIs, as well as the brief project summary of about 100 words. We also then require a proposal narrative, maximum of 5,000 words, and then you can have an appendix for references. We require a budget and budget narratives, and we have a provided template for that, which you can access through our website or through the AAP bridge. We require CVs and resumes of PIs, 1 page maximum, and then which we ask to be combined into one document to be submitted through the Qualtrics form. And letters of support from each partner's department, institution, or organization. I should mention that we do have, so all of this will be submitted through the Qualtrics form, which is accessible on our website or through the AAP bridge. And if you have any challenges with that Qualtrics form, please feel free to email aap@msu.edu when you are working to submit that proposal. Next slide. A little bit about selection criteria, and I think Derek will also touch on this a bit later, as well as my other colleagues, Abraham and Kara. But we want to see evidence of an AAP partnership principles. We want to see that this has been a mutually beneficial, co-created proposal. And our partnership principles are accountability, equity, inclusivity, sustainability, and transparency. And I'll say a little more about those in a minute. Next, we want to make sure that the proposal would be aligned, the proposed activities would be aligned to AAP's 3 pillars and 7 research priority areas. As you see here, and as Tony highlighted earlier, we have our AAP pillars of building bridges, that's partnerships across continents, regions, sectors. We have transforming institutions, which is largely capacity strengthening and orienting institutions towards strong partnerships, and transforming lives. And then Tony went through our 7 priorities, which are all underpinned by cross-cutting gender and inclusion. Next, we would like it to demonstrate potential for, oh, can you go back 1 slide? Sorry. Thank you. We'd like the proposal to demonstrate potential for impact in both disciplines and fields. This can be transdisciplinary and in people's lives. One of our ultimate goals of AAP is transforming lives. And so this is transforming lives in Africa and beyond. So we'd like that demonstrated in the proposal, how that proposal would create an impact, presumably, both in the broader problem-solving academic space, but also on people's lives. We'd like the proposal to demonstrate a potential for leveraging additional external funding. These are just seed grants that we hope will expand the research into and capture the attention of external funders. We would need to see a thorough monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan. Again, Derek will speak to that in his presentation. And as gender and inclusion is a cross-cutting principle, we want to ensure that there is diversity and inclusion integrated throughout the proposal and program activities. Next slide. A bit about AAP partnership principles. I mentioned that we want to see a research team structure and project design that reinforces accountability and is equitable. So it should demonstrate a shared vision, that there's mutual benefit and mutual capacity building. A proposal that is inclusive in its approach. Diversity and inclusion is reflected on the research team itself. So on the members of the research team should be diverse and inclusive, and in the project's design and approach, looking at who the project is impact and taking into account how people might be impacted differently based on their positionality. Collaboration must be sustainable beyond the initial grant cycle, with a view toward long-term collaboration. So we want to see that the proposal reflects a sustainable effort at addressing a problem and transforming lives. And finally, a proposal development process that is transparent with all partners engaged from the beginning. We'll be looking at the proposal itself, we'll be looking at the budget and the narrative, and showing that objectives, activities, resource mobilization, and resource allocation plans are developed jointly. So evidence of that will be part of the review process. Just a quick note, and Kara will cover this in her presentation, but we want to note that indirect costs are not eligible expenses for institutions, that we will not fund equipment exceeding $5,000 or construction-related costs. Regular MSAU salary is ineligible, however, summer salary is allowable. Salary is an allowable expense, but the total salary across all institutions cannot exceed 30% of the total project budget. MSU salary does not require fringe. So just to note that for the fiscal officers from MSU who are here. And I think that is the end of my piece of things. Oh, well, the most important part, just the application deadline is due Wednesday, August 14th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And awards, we plan for awards to be announced in early October, with implementation beginning between November 20th and January 22nd. So thank you, and I will turn it, oh, sorry, I'm preempting myself. You can find the PIRA call for proposals under the grants and fellowships opportunity on the AAP Bridge. And if you're not familiar with the AAP Bridge, I encourage you to go to that site, create a profile, and this is a great way to find partners to work on the proposal. And so you can access through our AAP Bridge site. You can indicate your interest, as I mentioned, and find potential partners. And then you can also find the call for proposals available on AAP's website at this link here. Okay, next. All right, I will turn it. I'll turn it back to Justin, who's our MC, and then we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. All right, next we are going to learn a little bit more about how to develop a strong proposal for the PIRA program. So I will turn it over to my colleague, Derek Tobias.
All right, thank you so much, Justin. And good day, everyone. As Justin mentioned, my name is Derek Tobias, and I am a program manager here at AAP. Amy went through the different components of the proposal, and so I'll be talking a little bit about recommendations or things to keep in mind while you're developing that proposal. So next slide, please. All right. All of this information can be found on our website, so I should mention that before I delve into it. So we'll have that as a resource for everyone. The cover sheet, including a project title, PI names and titles, institutional affiliations, and a brief 100 words project summary is required. For the proposal narrative, that is, again, a max of 5,000 words with one appendix for your references cited. Now, when we talk about a description of the partnership, We're talking about capacity statements, which outline the partner's strengths in relation to the proposed roles and responsibilities in the partnership. We're also talking about a description of the past or ongoing partnership, if applicable. As Amy mentioned, these are meant to be seed grants, so it's perfectly okay if you're forming a new partnership. If that is the case, you might want to spend more time on Part C, the rationale for the partnership and evidence it will create or cultivate equitable, sustainable, and mutually beneficial partnerships. The problem statement, theory of change, and relevance to AAP's themes and pillars is also very important. And we'll be talking a little bit more later about that in the monitoring and evaluation section. We also need to have the clearly defined objectives of the proposed partnership. Now that would tie into the program activities and a logical framework connecting these activities with their intended outputs or outcomes, I'm sorry. We do define those terms a little bit later, so please bear with us. But we also provide an example of a visual aid for a logical framework or to align the different activities with the monitoring and evaluation. We give you some freedom to make that your own, essentially, but we do offer that as an example. Also included in that proposal narrative, we will be looking for the timeline of the project and activities, and the brief MEL plan outlining proposed indicators and data collection methods, which again, we'll go into more later. Also, as mentioned, since this is meant to be seed funding, we are interested in learning what the potential sources of additional external funding would be to carry on the activities of the partnership or to sustain the impact beyond the initial funding. So besides the proposal narrative, we have that line item budget and budget narrative, which Kara will talk more about. And we do provide that template on our website. And we also have the requirement of a letter of support from each partner. We do provide a template for that. And the reason for that is we really want to see the institutional buy-in behind the PIs. So to know that the institutions, the organizations behind those individuals are also aware and very much involved with this project. All right, next slide, please. Oh, also, I didn't mention, because it's kind of hard to see on that slide, I can't see it, but also CVs. The CVs of the PIs is also required. Unfortunately, that's cut off. Okay, next slide. All right, and touching upon some areas of the proposal narrative that teams might be thinking about or have questions about, these are just some tips, things to consider when you're drafting the problem statement. So some questions to ask. What is the pressing problem your team is addressing? How do you know it's important? Why is your team uniquely suited to conduct the project? And outline any previous work you have done that lays the foundation for the project and how the work might continue after the project. So that's delving a little bit deeper into that second bullet point on the previous slides, but just some definitions to keep in mind when developing the project we'll talk about now. So we've used these terms, now we can define them. The goal, what we mean by that is goals are what you hope to accomplish, your vision, and these are not very measurable, which makes them different from the objectives. The goals are more of the hierarchy, things that you hope to accomplish. Objectives are more specific. These are things that you will be accomplishing. They are measurable, and they're closely tied to your methods of carrying out the project. The inputs are resources that are needed for program implementation. That includes staff time, facilities, equipment, everything that would need to be acquired in order for those activities to be successful. We've said activities a lot, so let's define that. The activities are any processes, actions, or tasks that are an intentional part of program implementation. The outputs and outcomes so these terms are defined different ways. We wanted to be specific in how we use these terms. So for the sake of the PIRA, we define outputs. These are direct products of the activities. An example of that would be a training workshop was held for 30 participants. That is an output of the activity of the program. Now, the outcome describes the change. So this is a little bit different. This describes the change in knowledge, attitudes, skills, behaviors, etc., that you expect as a result of your activities or your intervention. So we also have an example here. So an example here is, as a result of the workshop, participants increased their skills and knowledge to track crop prices via a cell phone app. So it's not the activity itself, but it's the change in the status quo as a result of that intervention. Below here, we have an example. This is from the Kellogg Foundation, I believe. The link, yeah, it's the U.S. Kellogg Foundation, and this is a resource for those looking for project or logic models. You can use those to help develop that while you're thinking through these things. So we wanted to share that reference as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so here are some questions to think about when developing your proposal. These elements are things that the review committee will be taking into consideration when they read and evaluate your proposal. Whoops.
Sorry, Derek, hold on one second. There
No
you go.
problem. All right, and so these questions really help make sure that you're in alignment with our pillars, our goals, and our principles, including equitable partnerships and the co-creation of the project. So things to keep in mind and ask yourself is, does our project align with one of AAP's 3 pillars? And does our project address at least one of AAP's priority areas? Is there potential for the project's deliverables to contribute to academic, technical, or technological fields? Remember, we're really focused on the impact, that real world impact, how it affects people's lives. Does our project have the potential to create innovative models of community engagement that positively impacts people's lives? Is there potential for our PIs to attract or leverage external funding? Does the team have any ideas for potential funding sources? Now, in a proposal, you might still be thinking of ideas. So, again, it's great to offer, if you don't know for certain, you can say, these are areas that we'll explore. So it's okay not to have all of the answers when you're developing it, but, you can offer information on how that information will be received. Another question is, do we demonstrate how we integrate gender equity and inclusion in all stages of the project? That is very important. Do we link activities to outputs and outcomes? Did we include a timeline? And do we describe the MEL tools that we will use and the indicators to monitor progress and success? Did we describe a timeline for evaluation and reporting? All right, so those are questions just to make sure that you are addressing all of the different elements of the proposal. Next slide, please. All right, Amy touched upon the budget a little bit, and our colleague Kara will discuss it more in detail later. But we wanted to also talk about it briefly here. These are some things that we want to highlight to teams to think about and reflect on. We very much recommend starting the budget early, and these are some reasons why it's important to start that budget process early. The development of the budget has a big impact upon the project itself. So, it really should be designed in that design phase along with the activities. The budget will entail, describe those activities essentially. So it's really important to build that as a team. It really, to really honor the equitable partnership, this would need to be developed with all of the different PIs. So why starting early is important is that it offers insight into the team dynamics. So as you're working with this team, are colleagues keeping everyone in the loop? Is the leader leading? How is your input on the project and the budget received? Who gets listened to during these conversations? And who doesn't get listened to during these conversations? Essentially, you'll learn a lot about the team dynamics based on the conversations around the budget. So if there's any kind of challenge, you would want to identify that early and take steps to alleviate that. Also, knowledge of how project is taking shape. So when the budget has been roughly sketched, it needs a more detailed plan. For example, if you are doing field work, planning out the additional details are important, such as dates, location, number of participants, duration, travel, etc. The answers to these are directly related to and impact activities in the budget. So really, they need to be developed in tandem. And so being a part of that budget development process, you'll be very much aware of all of the different program components. It's also good for knowing who is doing what. So in the budget, you'll understand who's responsible for what based on that allocation. So is everyone clear on the roles and the responsibilities of the team? Another reason why it's important is build your knowledge about the project. Is the project and scope clear? This will help you know what is possible and what is needed for the project to be successful. So again, helping to understand the scale and the scope of that project. The inputs and activities are tied to costs in the budget. So again, when talking about different activities, it's really important to understand what inputs are required in order to conduct those, as well as how that impacts the overall budget. So really where that fits into the larger scheme. So getting started early is important. Next slide, please. All right, fantastic. Now, we wanted to touch on some common reasons for declining proposals. This is an effort of us to live our principles of transparency and accountability. So we wanted to let you know and remind you what the selection criteria is, and also some of the common pitfalls that we've noticed, as well as some that we've encountered when writing proposals ourselves. So these are some general tips, as well as some very specific that we've run into, as well as seen. So a big reason for a declined proposal is that the applicant missed the due date. So please do make sure that you have time to have all of the material ready to go and turned in on time. Guidelines for proposed content, format, and or length were not followed. So again, for this to be equitable, we need to apply the same rules to all of the proposals. So if any of those guidelines are not met, we do take that seriously. Proposal area did not fit the funding call. So again, make sure that the project proposed is in alignment with AAP's priority areas and pillars. Another reason is that the project plan is unclear or vague and not presented in concrete detail. So, this speaks to the reader of that proposal needs to be assured of the project's success. So offering very clear details on how the project will be implemented, what is intended as a result, as the outcomes, that will help the reader know that this has a better chance of success. You really want them to see the project. Another reason for declined proposals is that the proposed methods did not seem applicable and may not yield the results. So that would be a misalignment between the problem statement and the activities they're really meant to resolve the problem or to change the problem. Another reason for declining proposals is that applicants need more effective approaches to address the community need problem, or that the problem project is more complex than the applicants realized. So again, proposing activities that don't necessarily address the scope of the problem or really get to the heart of it. Another reason for declining proposals is that the project appeared to be beyond the capacity and experience of the applicant, which would be something determined by the capacity statement of the partner. So when talking about the partnership and the different roles of the partners, you would want to, mention how, or specifically mention points that would give the reader assurance that they do have the capacity and the experience to pull off this project. Let me just make sure. All right. The final point there is that the budget was unrealistic or unclear. Again, this is a great reason to start the budget early, is to really make sure that it is tied to the activities, and those activities will address the problem that is identified. All right, next slide, please. All right, and finally, here are just a few best practices to keep in mind when submitting proposals. A few of them are general, a few of them are specific to the PIRA call. We do ask you to remember to specify if you are applying for a planning grant or a scaling grant. Again, the number of pages of the proposal narrative. Please do number the pages of the proposal narrative and check that the word count is no more than 5,000 words. Ensure that the proposal narrative includes all information listed in the PIRA call. Please remember to use the templates provided in the call, which are on our website, for the budget and letters of support. And please remember to ensure all required proposal elements are included in that submission, including the cover sheet, the narrative. I'll specify the proposal narrative, I'm sorry, because we also have the budget narrative and the line item budget, as well as the CVs for the PIs and the letters of support from the institutions. If anybody has any questions, you can contact Justin or myself. We will put our email addresses in the chat. And with that, I believe I pass it over to Abraham.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, wherever you are. Thank you so much for attending this. We care about how you communicate and engage your research for many reasons. That the reasons that I'll talk about in my next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, part of the reasons, as you know, we want to transform lives. Part of the reasons the reason why we care about communicating and engaging in your research is that there are many things or many trends and factors that influence how knowledge in general is consumed, including research or science, science. I'll keep on using the word research or science. And such trends could be political trends, business trends, cultural trends, beliefs, societal traditions, associations, and many others. If you have a challenge in politics, you need to probably think about how to engage your policymakers. Or, just cultural trends could just make it hard for your research. So all these factors can influence the success or failure of your research for impact. Next slide, please. So already when you talk about communication and engagement, there are challenges that are facing scientific research content or knowledge in general. One is that it is a technical field and it can be less appealing to many people despite its importance to advance innovation and transform lives and economies. There are some levels of myths around it, misconceptions and mistrust of research and scientific solutions by societies. You may remember the COVID vaccines and all that. It's a huge one. Exclusive, it actually has been seen as an exclusive process with research and lack of participation by societies. You may know that traditionally, science has always been a thing for universities. It's published in certain journals and it never finds the light of the day in accessible public platforms. So lack of understanding on the importance of research and how it benefits society, it also impacts how information from research is consumed. Next slide, please. So for that, it has led to little or no investment in research in general, and particularly in communication. And the inequitable partnership with the research projects between scientists and stakeholders. There are fast-moving trends in politics, business culture, and all that. As you may know, when it comes to research, it's something that takes time. The results can come many years after the project has started. So how do you justify that to funders? How do you justify that to stakeholders who are part of that? And how do you keep getting more investment into research? It's a challenge. So that is why we somehow think about communicating and engaging research. Researchers and scientists for quite a time now, they've been seen as occupying ivory towers, or the culture of, or we know it all, I'm the scientist and all that. So we are trying to really go against that, where we are saying knowledge creation, there must be equity in knowledge creation, including both scientists and society. Yeah, next slide. So what is it? What is this science communication and engagement? So the process, it's actually the process of effectively sharing scientific knowledge, discoveries, and concepts with diverse stakeholders in a way that is accessible, engaged, and that is relevant to them. It involves bridging the gap between the scientific community and the general public, fostering understanding and interest and dialogue about scientific topics, and encouraging participation in scientific activities, discussions, and decision-making processes, depending on all your stakeholders. Next slide. Yeah, so this year, this time around, that is why you will find there's a component that speaks to that 10% of the total budget that is requested, that will be applying for, must be earmarked for communication and engagement. For example, if a team is requesting a scaling grant for $100,000, at least $10,000 of that must be budgeted for communication and engagement efforts. And such developing, that 10% we expect you to be focused, to be earmarking it for developing creative projects that translate the research engagement workshops and developing the utilization of dissemination tools such as video production, creation of digital resources, and community engagement activities. We are no longer saying, we are actually encouraging researchers to not just be producing information. We want them to also think about what they're producing as information. Is it engaging? Is it being utilized out there? And I'll talk about that more. Next slide, please. Now, you may have heard this term many times. Research or science doesn't exist in a bubble. Many stakeholders that need to be informed and engaged. Stakeholders are needed to to be engaged for many reasons. Reasons for funding. There's taxpayers' money. Most of the time, it's funded by the government and or donors. They need to be informed, engaged on your results. Also, the participation, people who are engaged or participating in your research need to know exactly what is it that you're doing, because research is technical itself. Knowledge exchange, for reasons that we are trying to create a scale whereby knowledge is not only one directional coming from universities to society, but also it has to be a two-way exchange where society is also informing how knowledge is created, should be created. Knowledge about products or solutions for them, it should be created. Hence why we are saying it should be relevant. There are regulators around research, so we need to also to be involved in them so that, as the research changes, the landscape is changing throughout from time to time. So we want them to be also engaged such that they can, be updating the regulations and all that. And most importantly, for policy change, if you are looking to change policy, definitely you need to be exploring ways to engage your policymakers in ways that are, make sense to them, in ways that are creative, in ways that are really engaging and, that opens their mind and, making them to think about new solutions in the perspective of your research. Next slide. So for that, in the past, what has happened or what is currently happening right now, you realize that there's communication of research. Most people would mean, okay, we are producing brochures, you're having a talk, but since this field is moving, it's been a field that has been here for almost 2 decades now, relatively new, but it's starting to think deeper, that we need to think about translation, not only the audience. It has to be about who you're talking to, where they are, what is their interest, and how do you involve them, and hence engagement bit. So you have to be thinking about the empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, which now is known as lived experiences, building the trust, thinking about uptake, thinking about reciprocity and mutual benefits. Knowledge exchange, as I mentioned, is about two-way, creating a two-way environment, and also leading to facilitating a shared outcome. A project, you need to have a project that everyone, when they look, they should be proud of and realize that it was co-created, everyone is involved. Hence, it makes it easier for policymakers or other stakeholders who are involved to think about uptake or adopting the research results. So we are no longer talking about communication only. We want to encourage engagement, creative ways of really unpacking your research. Next slide. So there has to be a delicate balance between communication materials, which is dissemination. Ask about how do you create that delicate balance of communicating at the same time engaging people or your stakeholders. Next slide. So there are many ways to creating, coming up with communication and engagement projects. You may have seen science festivals, which is a platform where you are creating fun events, you are making science accessible to the public. There could be research exhibitions. You could be working with experts in that field to look at your project. and interpreting it or decoding it. There are science projects, dialogue platforms. The common one these days is actually podcasts. They are very common. How do you work with those experts and unpacking and decoding your research in ways that are attractive and in ways that break the trends, in ways that centers and places your research at the center of conversations. Science journalism, there are people nowadays who are actually reporting, specialized reporters in science, and they know how to simplify and how to write content in ways that impacts readers. Museums, art galleries, citizen science, how do you make communities being part of your research, participatory, such that they become part of your project. So there are many other approaches. Next slide, please. So note that, please, that there's no one method or one approach to this. There are many, but the most important thing about this is that the objective is to tell a story in the most engaging way and facilitate dialogue and knowledge exchange. And when I say that, we are not saying go out there and make sure that you tell people what to do. In this engagement, it's always about there's no right or wrong answer. So you could actually get a resistance in your project. And to me, that would be actually a good thing because you have sparked dialogue. The idea is not really to get the good answers. The idea here is not to send out dogmatic experiences. The idea is to make sure that there's enough dialogue. People are talking about it. It's at the center of conversations. At that point, at least it allows you to loop back in the content that is on the discussions back into your research, hence knowledge exchange. So I suggest that it is safe, though, when you're applying, to think about to engaging experts on this work who's going to work with you on that. You may also identify and engage creative communicators, engagers to undertake this. Co-creation, working with your community and stakeholders to tell their story in relation to your research. Quite often, how I've seen this is that usually they would have an interpreter or someone who's an expert, whether they're an expert discussant or they're an artist working with you in between your communities to try to understand your project in ways that in the end, everyone will feel safe and understand what you're talking about. And the communication or the engagement expert is able to protect or project it in ways that are simple and digestible, in ways that break the trends within your society or your community. Next slide, please. So that will be the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Should there be any questions, you'll be able to direct them to my team, and we'll be able to assist. Thank you. Back to you, Derek.
All right, thank you so much, Abraham. Now we will talk a little bit about orienting our work towards impact and creating an MEL plan. So we've talked a little bit about the monitoring and evaluation and learning plan, and now we're going to define a little bit what we mean by that. So just get us started, what is a monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan? Before we get started, I should say, there are a lot of different formats for these. Essentially, we are going to describe the different elements that we would like to see within the proposal. We don't need to see a standalone monitoring and evaluation and learning plan. However, these different core components of what are usually found in a plan do need to be found in the proposal. It is very important to be thinking about all of these elements in order to document the important work you do to show that impact. And as Abraham mentioned, to really communicate that outward and to engage with the various stakeholders. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But essentially, monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan is a framework that describes the proposal team's intention to document project activities, answer evaluation questions, which will show progress towards the project goals and objectives, and to actionalize the information that you have collected. Next slide, please. All right. Now, I find MEL plan is most useful when it can act as a standalone document. However, given the parameters of this proposal, it might be better to just include these at different points within the proposal. But we wanted to provide this overview with the idea that it could be a standalone document, essentially, because that is very useful for a team to develop during the design phase and to revisit during the implementation to see if things are going according to plan, if anything needs to be changed, however. So just to keep these in mind, what is generally included in MEL plans, you have a brief project overview, which includes the problem statement, theory of change. So how is the problem going to be addressed by the activities proposed, and what is the anticipated outcome, as well as the project goals and objectives. So, those will already be included in the proposal, don't need to be reiterated in a specific section for this. Again, just making sure that everyone's aware. So into the monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, it has that monitoring component. It usually has three main components you see here: the monitoring, the evaluation, and the learning component. A guiding principle to the development of the plan is to include all of those processes that will produce information that will be used at periodic project reviews to inform both the decision-making within the project, as well as to identify lessons learned for future projects, and that can be disseminated. So the monitoring component includes the methodology or the rationale for the techniques and processes that will be utilized in that monitoring phase. It also describes the tools that will be used, such as surveys or interviews, focus groups, things like that. Essentially, how will that information be collected? And the timing and frequency of the data collection. So when will that data be collected and how often? The evaluation component describes what the collected data will be used to evaluate. For instance, impact evaluations seek to measure the extent to which the change seen in the outcomes are caused by that intervention. Another type of evaluation measures the performance of the team and to the extent the interventions are implemented according to the original design and schedule. So the impact evaluation really looks at the outcomes and how much of those outcomes are attributable to the activities of the program. The performance evaluation, that's more about whether or not things went according to schedule. Both are very useful for different reasons. These are things to think about. What will you be evaluating and why? So really, to tell your story, what do you need to evaluate? And there are benefits for both, and you can do both. The learning component describes how the information will be used. So the results of the evaluation can be used to refine future activities during a program, essentially for the management to adapt their plan. So that is the adaptive management, and that adaptation would be on the experience results. As Abraham did a great job talking about the information dissemination engagement. Things to consider are the different audiences and different ways to creatively engage with those stakeholders, those different audiences. So that is what we mean. The information can be used internally as well as externally. So, how will you use that information? That should be described. Also, the roles and responsibilities for the monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Who will do what and when with the timeline? So who's responsible for the collection, the analyzing, the evaluation, as well as the dissemination? That is all important to discuss, to figure out, and to do it early so that can be included in the budget, as well as in the overall project design. All right, and next we will move on to an example of a visual aid to show the alignment of the activities, as mentioned earlier. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is just one example of how you can present this information. Obviously, there's a word limit, so visual representations can help with that. It can also just help organize your team in understanding which activities lead into which objective, who is doing what, when, and how it will be evaluated. So if you look across the top of the table here, you see objective 1. All of the rows beneath that, well, not all of them, all of the rows beneath that going to objective 2 would be activities that would lead towards the realization of that first objective. So you would have as many as you need there. You list the activity in the first row, who is responsible in that second column. I'm sorry, the first column would be the activity, second column would be the lead, Third column would be when would those activities take place? Then you would list the anticipated output, so what is produced by that activity, as well as the intended outcome. So what is the change that resulted based on that activity? What is the indicator that you will use in order to measure that progress, as well as the tool? So how will you collect that information? As well as the frequency. Here we're talking about the information collection frequency. So when and how often will that information be collected? All right. And I believe we've defined all of the terms here except for indicator. So we go into that a little bit more on the next slide. Essentially, an indicator, they are signs of progress. One way to think about an indicator is this is a unit of measurement. So they are used to determine whether the project or program or intervention is on its way to achieving its objective and goals. So when you're trying to determine which unit of measurement we're going to use to measure progress, we advise, and this is very common, to think SMART, right? And this is, the indicator should be specific, it should be measurable, it should be achievable and attributable to your intervention, it should be relevant to the problem that's addressed, and realistic, meaning that it can be achieved, and also time bound. So something that can be realized within the parameters of the program. Obviously, a lot of that impact would happen after. So, essentially, when I think about a monitoring evaluation plan, I think about what can be measured at the end of the project, as well as what you anticipate happening in the future. So, you can tell your story in both ways. This is what we've accomplished, this is what we've measured, this is what we know, and this is what we anticipate will happen as a result of this outcome in the future. So all of that is important to keep in mind. And now I will pass it over to Kara to discuss budget tips.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kara Lochitz. I'm AAP's fiscal officer. I'll be going through kind of the specifics of the PIRA grant budgeting here. So budgets, in sum, help to provide a framework for project design and plan. They provide reasonable estimates of the work that will be funded. They provide clarity for collaborators to determine budget amounts for each activity. And they also provide a clear guidance to the PIs who are responsible for the appropriate use of funds entrusted to them. Creating budgets, these typically differ by funders overall. When developing a concept note for a specific funder, make sure to pay attention to their guidelines, since some may not allow certain expenses. Examples are fringe, travel, indirect costs. They also may have specific language and descriptions for their budget categories. So typically, one of the first categories of a budget is the personnel expenses. Who is doing the work? What are they doing? How much time are they devoting to the project? This is generally salaries and fringes. Underneath that, it can go deeper into faculty, technician, research associates, grad students, and also undergrad students. Next up would be non-personnel expenses. What else besides salary and fringe is needed to carry out the project? This can be anything from equipment, travel, participant support costs, and then other direct costs that are needed to carry out the project. First off is equipment. So the definition of equipment is an article of non-expendable, tangible personal property with a useful life of more than a year. An example of that would be lab equipment. Typically, the cost of the item must be $5,000 or more to be classified as equipment, but for the PIRA awards, any equipment that exceeds the $5,000 amount is not allowable. And then items that are less than that $5,000 amount may then be listed in the supply category that would usually be under equipment. So the next section is travel. To distinguish between domestic and international travel, for international, keep in mind the currency exchange rates. This can be hotel, transportation, etc. So usually we use these rates from Awanda that is linked right below here in the slides. For travel costs, most funders require specific details for determining travel amounts, as in who is traveling, where, how many days. This should include airfare, mileage for ground transportation, lodging, per diems, and visa fees. So the cost for international travel may not exceed the government international rates that are linked down below. That'll list off per diems, lodging limits, and then the domestic rates, which is also linked down below, that lists the per diem and lodging rates as well. Participant support costs are usually defined as a non-employee who is the recipient, not the provider of a service or training associated with a workshop, conference, seminar, symposium. So this can include event registration fees for that participant, event support costs for lodging and meal expenses paid to the event facility, any training materials needed, stipends that are allowed that are predetermined amounts paid directly to the participant, subsistence allowance, predetermined amount for lodging, meals, and laundry. Local area participants are exempt from having these costs covered since they are local and not traveling. Travel costs for the sole purpose of the trip is to participate in the project activity. And then also make note that the faculty PI travel should not be budgeted as a participant support expense. And then lastly, the last section is other direct costs. These are materials and supplies, provide the cost breakdown for these. So again, anything under that $5,000 amount that would be listed as a supply and not an equipment piece. These can be publications, graduate tuition and fees that do not go under the fringe benefits, computer services and equipment rental fees, consultants that use a reasonable rate, usually hourly, and then rental fees for space, computers if essential and allowable that are allocated based on anticipated use and provide a direct benefit to the project. Then we have F&A, which is facilities and administrative costs. These are typically a percentage of direct costs, but in this case, for the PIRA budgeting, indirect costs are not an allowable expense on the PIRA awards. However, items normally covered by indirect costs may be listed as a line item under direct costs itself. So some PIRA specific budget guidelines. Again, indirect costs are not allowable. Equipment exceeding the 5,000 is not allowed. Anything under that would be listed under other direct costs or supplies. So the total project salary and fringe cannot exceed 30% of the combined project budget. Note that MSU salary will not need to budget for fringe, as these are GS funds, general fund funds, and fringe is centrally funded for these types of funds. Another thing to note is cost share for consortium and partner PIs should be known for in-kind cost shared project expenses and will be positively noted as part of the proposal evaluation. In this case, for this round of PIRA awards, 10% of cost share is a required piece of the project, and then also the 10% of the communication is also required. So for the budget justification and narrative, make sure to follow the same order as the budget categories. This will be listed as the same line items, all in the same order. Provide details for all expenses. Make sure to explain any unusual circumstances or requests in the budget narrative. And then also avoid using a lot of dollar amounts in the justification. Make sure to include any calculations in the budget itself just to see where the amounts are coming from. And then make sure your budget justification matches your budget, mostly in the same order and the total amounts. And then here we have a sample budget justification. You can see it's broken down with the phase, or it could be the title as in travel. It'll go into deeper clarity on what the travel expenses are for. And then overall, it will have the total amount for each event under or above the listed expenses. And then some final points on the PIRA budgets. One budget should be submitted per project. We can note that the template for the PIRA budget does have a tab for each partner budget that rolls into a project summary total. So those will be separated in different tabs. In addition to collaboration among PIs, the MSU faculty PI should work with their unit research administrator or FO to complete the budget, and they will be responsible for the submission of the overall project budget and management of the grant funds if awarded. Consortium and other PIs will need to follow all procedures of their institution and note that any effort on the project is paid to the institution to support their effort. And then lastly, the completed budget and justification will be evaluated together as part of the overall project. And that is it for all the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. All right. Well, that gets through our presentation. I see quite a few questions in the Q&A section. If you've not added your question there yet and you do have one, please add it. And now we are going to open it up to questions. So I will invite all of our panelists back to join us. Let me just stop sharing our screen here. Right. And then we will kick this off with some questions. So starting right from the top here. If I identify a project in Ghana, how do I get a PI from MSU and other partners? So I have a feeling this is going to be a fairly common theme that we're going to get in this Q&A. So identifying project partners from MSU and from AAP consortium institutions. Does anyone want to take that on?
Well, Justin, I think you have some language that you've used to share with people who have inquired about this. Maybe you could start and then the rest of the team can chip in.
Sure. Yeah. So my first recommendation would be to check out AAP Bridge, as we've mentioned a few times today. So as a reminder, if you're unfamiliar, this is a digital platform that we've put together focused on connecting researchers across the AAP consortium and beyond. It's open to anyone. So if you have any interest there, you can find details of the PIRA call, as well as profiles of researchers from across our consortium, and then you can reach out and connect that way. Anything else you want to add, Amy?
Yeah, so you said the AAP Bridge, but then
Right.
Did you mention the website profiles and all of that stuff? Sorry.
Yeah, so
I was reading another question.
Sorry, specifically if you're looking for folks from MSU and you have a specific project area in mind, oftentimes the best way to find folks in that area are to just search through MSU's website. It's very comprehensive, very thorough. Each department keeps updated profiles on their faculty members. And given we're such a large and varied institution, that's really kind of your first starting point. That should also have contact information for specific people. If you find that you're having trouble connecting with certain people and you have maybe folks in mind, feel free to reach out to the AAP team. We would be happy to make introductions on your behalf. Oftentimes we find that it's a bit easier to connect with MSU faculty if it's coming through us, as many people know AAP and we're also within the institution, so that tends to ease any hurdles there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then reaching out to AAP members, institutions, we have listed on our website the focal points for each of those institutions. Again, we encourage you to check online if there are profiles available for faculty members there. But then there's contact information for our focal points. I believe at least one of our focal points is on this call. I saw Antonia there. That can help you identify researchers within their institution. But again, if the institution has profiles of their faculty or researchers on their website, we encourage you to look up that. Sorry, it says Peter's saying that AAP Bridge is frozen, which may be a good sign that many people are logging in and trying to create profiles. We'll deal with that issue in a minute.
Thank you for the heads up, Peter.
Thank you for the heads up. But anyway, if you identify a person and you're having trouble reaching them, you can contact our AAP focal points at each of our institutions. And you can find our institution members at our website. Maybe someone can throw that
I can link to it here quickly
in the chat, and I've also put it in the Q&A. Jose, Derek, others of you have any other tips for finding partners from MSU and our AAP member institutions?
Those were the big ones that I can think of. The bridge being the first choice, and then the websites and focal points.
Mm-hmm. Jose, any additions from you? I think this is the biggest question that we face. Oh, and Jose, you are on mute. It seems like she's having trouble unmuting.
Or we can move on. Jose, feel free to jump in. We've got a lot of questions to get through. So, all right. Next is if the team for a project from different countries, should the project necessarily be replicable in member countries to qualify for funding?
Can you repeat that, Justin? Say that again.
So if team members for a project are from different countries, should the project necessarily be replicable in member countries to qualify for funding?
No, I don't think so. You know, we have some different examples. So let's say that the focus of a project is in Kenya on coastal fisheries, and we have people who work in Uganda on, well, no, we have people who work in Tanzania on coastal fisheries as well. The project site might continue to be in Kenya, but the expertise from the Tanzanian researchers would come into play, for example. That's just an example. So no, I mean, as long as the expertise brought to the team makes sense, and there's a site there, it wouldn't need to be carried out in each of those countries. I hope that makes sense. Again, others want to chime in here?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, it wouldn't necessarily need to be replicable because the culture and context is different in every country. We do want to see the partnerships between, MSU and the consortium members. Other partners are welcome to join the proposal teams. And then really beyond that, as well as focus on the pillars and the priority areas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you both. Right, next question. Can one researcher be involved in the writing of more than one proposal with different partners?
One researcher be on proposals with
Multiple
different
teams,
partners?
yeah.
Yeah. I know that we, what did we say in the call, Justin? I believe I know that we only want researchers to lead one team, to be listed as a lead PI on one team. In the past, we have allowed them to be a team member on another team, but let me just make sure that I confirm what is said in the call for proposals. You would think we know this front and back, and we do, but we just want to make sure that we are being accurate.
Looks like we don't have any specific language about not serving on multiple teams, but I would imagine we would follow the same guidance of acting as
that
lead.
that we do for transforming institutions, right?
Right.
So you could serve as a lead PI on one proposal only. If you might be a team member on additional proposals. There's no limit of proposals you could be a team member on, but you can only lead one proposal.
Okay. All right, next question. How does an institution in Uganda join the partnership? Well, the easiest way for PIRA, if you are in Uganda, I would tell you to find folks at Makerere University. They are our Ugandan partner. So that would probably be your best bet. I think if you're looking for someone local and you're not already part of that institution, got a lot of good folks at Makerere who I'm sure would be happy to form a partnership.
Great. I think there is some, I wanted to make sure Jose is here because there are some questions around membership, specifically. Jose, are you there? Okay, we may wait for her to be there, to be able to answer those questions about membership. I make sure she chimes in on that. Okay.
Right. So next question, how do we get partners from MSU? We've already addressed that. Can I be a partner from Pakistan in this proposal? So again, the eligibility requirements are that lead PIs must come from MSU and from an AAP African member institution. However, you can have additional partners globally. There's no restriction or limitation on that. So as long as you meet those two requirements of an MSU PI and an AAP member consortium PI, yes, you can definitely take part in this.
Okay.
All right. Next question is, can the AAP African partners address an issue that impacts non-AAP African partners? And how can an African country or institution become an AAP partner? So that second question we'll address in the membership discussion. But the first question, can the AAP African partners address an issue that impacts non-AAP African partners?
So
I would
yes,
say
I think, yeah,
yes.
go ahead, Derek. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I would say yes, as long as it aligns with the priority areas, then the problem could be faced by anyone.
Right. I think that ideally we would want I mean, it needs to be relevant in Africa as well as in other countries. So, for example, larger issues like climate change are going to be impacting globally. And so it may manifest itself, as Derek mentioned earlier, it may manifest itself differently in one place than another. But if there's a case to be made for that comparative work, certainly that can be included. Also, if there are, research to be done in another context, which can clearly show how it would impact and in the course of the project impact on an African context, then that could be included as well. So I think that comparative and trans-regional aspect of things is something that we would be excited to see in these proposals. We had funded our previous round. We had specifically wanted trans-regional work. We had one that was focused on work between Africa and Asian partners, and we had another between Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. So we think that trans-regional work is important and can shed new insights on broader problems. But it would need to be relevant, and there would need to be an element of it focused on African challenges and African contexts. Yeah. I think I answered the question. Tony, any other insights from you?
No, not really. Just to agree with you to say yes. Ideally, we would want it to be relevant to the African context, but like you're saying, there are other challenges that transcend, Africa. So those, as you put it, climate change and education and things like that, that could still be eligible for funding. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you both. All right, next question. As Amy has mentioned, that PIs of previous rounds of projects are not eligible this time. My question is, if a group of PIs successfully executed a seeding grant of 50,000, would they be eligible for future rounds of expanding grant 100,000 as a second phase of partnership?
I mean, we have not formulated the call moving forward as a principle. We have not opened that next call, but we have worked specifically with teams who've been successful in lower tiers to secure external funding beyond that, or to participate in other AAP programs like transforming institutions, like the African Futures Program, etc. So no, we don't imagine that we're trying to expand the work of our program to include new teams of researchers at each round, but we would find other ways to support the team, whether it's by helping them secure external funding, or they would be eligible to apply for other AAP programs. We have in the past, our first round of strategic partnerships, we did secure some money to top up those grants to extend a bit longer, but we cannot guarantee that in the future moving forward. Others?
I would just want to make a point to reemphasize that those who were PIs on previous rounds of PIRA grants or the strategic partnership grants are not eligible to lead proposals this time around. So just to clarify that.
Yep.
Okay. Next question. As a 501c3 nonprofit registered in the US with operations in West Africa, how can we identify and select an AAP African member? We do not have an AAP affiliated university in the countries we operate in. Similar question to our previous one. I would recommend, we do have partners in West Africa. Maybe envisioning a project that is a bit more regional in scope rather than country specific might be your best bet there in order to kind of collaborate effectively with one of our West African partners. And again, I put that link in the chat to all of our consortium members and their contact info. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Another question about connecting to a PI from MSU. I think we've addressed that. Another question about membership, which we will note. Another question about membership. There's a lot of membership questions. Sorry, I'm just skimming through the Q&A
that's why
here.
I was hoping Jose would be able to chime in with us.
We
But
invited an MSU member to serve as PI. So can we invite an MSU member to serve as PI so that we qualify for a Tier 2 grant? The current PI is from University of Dar, which is an AAP member university. So yes,
so they would just need to,
you do need a PI from UDSM in this case, as well as one from MSU. So you need at least 2 co-PIs. Does the presenter mean adaptive management to achieve the stated goals and objectives? This sounds like a Derek question. Or are the goals and objectives flexible if justified by the adaptive management process?
That's a great question. And really the answer is yes to both. Usually a program's goals and objectives do not change. However, there is the case where maybe it does as a result of that implementation. More often, it's the goals and objectives stay the same, but the activities might be adapted in order to meet those goals and objectives. So if you find a more effective way of doing something, that would be a route to do. If the evaluation says, this is where we're finding the best results, and then you focus your activities on those that, in that region, then that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Derek. I've got another question here. Can an institution that works on peace and security apply? I would say yes, just following the same guidelines that we've already laid out. Make sure that you have an MSU PI as well as a PI from one of our African members.
And one point to add there, we have a lot of questions from outside organizations, which we love to see. We love to see those partnerships. One thing to keep in mind is when you're designing the project and when you're writing the proposal is how will those organizations add to the project team? What will their role and responsibility be? And why were they selected to do that? So, as long as that is justified, then really, any organization can fit itself into this ward.
Yeah, maybe Abraham, if you could speak to, how additional organizations can support the science engagement or the research engagement piece of things. I know you've seen some examples from some of our previous PIRA grants.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Indeed. what I think we can encourage is that we don't, I mean, we encourage people to continue looking for grants and growing their projects. There are many grants out there that support science communication and engagement. You could definitely use the same projects that you applied for, that you received to support your research communication and engagement, which could be centered around co-creation, participatory, including human-centered approaches to research. So there are many organizations out there that support that. I hope I answered your question.
Well, Abraham, I was just thinking about, how, bringing on organizations or partners from other sectors, like civil society organizations or private sector organizations might impact positively that research engagement piece of things.
Oh, yes, definitely. The more you have, the diversity of partnerships definitely would have improve your research impact, because it brings the diversity of thought and approaches to your research. And as I mentioned in my presentation, the research uptake of that becomes even easier. Say, for example, working with civil society, these are people who are very experienced when it comes to issues that are, on the ground with communities. And with such, you rather maybe think about a partner who's got experience in the field or the line that you are applying for. Say, for instance, if it's climate change, there are certain organizations that in communities that have done expansive work on that. So it will be easier to kind of piggyback on that experience and to have impact. Now, in terms of policy, stakeholder policy, it's always important to start the process from the beginning. Don't engage stakeholders in the middle of the project. It's always important, even at the application stage, you need to inform some of your stakeholders, tell them what you're doing, and even seek their support. And I believe also it may even strengthen your application if we see a letter from the Ministry of, so and so, or a letter from a civil society organization that we are partners with, an individual researcher who will be applying for this. So it strengthens your case that at least for us, we would understand that the research that you're doing, the results are not going to end within your organization or your institution. At least it gets to to be embedded in some form of process which can be considered for policy change or policy making. And the same goes to the private sector. Quite often when you bring in the private sector, you would be considering the sustainability of the project or whatever solution that you're offering. If it's a product, for example, you might think about testing that product in the market, and your private partner would be ideal for such. And I'm sure quite often private partners who are quite strong would sometimes bring their investment into the project, which in recent years has been another approach to bringing in funding to projects. I'm sure you would have heard about third stream income. So all those partners are a potential to really broaden your impact, including the sustainability of project. So what is important is about how do you engage them from the onset, and how do you bring the relevance to their business? How do you make sure that they see the mutual benefits from the onset before you even start? And when they write you the support letters that they are part of this, it will strengthen your case in terms of application, and we would see the sustainability or the continuity of that project without us. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's great answer. Thank you, Abraham. Very helpful information.
Great. Thank you both. Right, moving on. I've got a couple questions here from Jared Bakuza regarding our Student Research Fellowship. I would probably advise you to reach out to Amy directly about that. It
I'll
looks
put
to be
my
specific.
contact in the chat.
Yeah, so questions about that student research fellowship, please direct to Amy via email. It's probably going to be your best bet there. Jared also has a question. Is the Transforming Institutions strategic funding different from the PIRA grant?
Yes, it is. Justin, you want to take it?
Sure, yeah. So yes, Transforming Institutions, or TI as we often shorten it to, is different. Those are smaller scale grants focused more on institutional transformation, as the name suggests. Whereas the PIRA grants are focused more on broader, they're a broader scale and they're more research focused. So we are looking for individual research partnerships, kind of producing, traditional results, whereas TI is institutional transformation projects. So our previous round of TI is closed, though we will have future rounds going
Next
forward.
year.
Yep.
Next year.
Right. Is there a template for project description?
No, we do not have a template for that. Essentially, teams are free to describe the project any way they want to. As long as the components that we described are included, that's what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be a certain format, and we do not have a template.
I would advise, though, there is that 5,000 word limit with an appendix for references cited.
Great reminder.
Question from Chanel Foster. Does text used in figures such as the logic model and or theory of change count towards that 5,000 word limit? Also, is there a word count or page limit for the appendix?
My understanding is the appendix is 1 page. So there's not a word limit, but there is a space limit. And if you do use a logic model, then yes, those words would count towards that 5,000 limit, which is why I mentioned that, you can essentially, those elements of the monitoring and evaluation plan should be seen in the proposal, but don't have to be a standalone section. So when you're talking about the problem initially, you can then talk about the theory of change. Obviously, you'll want to mention the goals and objectives in the beginning of the proposal, but as long as those components are there, then we're happy with that. And so they would, yes, then count towards the word limit as well.
Great, thank you, Derek. Another question about identifying a partner from MSU. I believe we've addressed that, and we'll move on. Can the AAP African partners address an issue that impacts non-AAP African partners, and how? I think we've also addressed this one as well, so I'll just skip this one. Is there a cap on how many proposals a team can apply? So again, there is a limit of 1 proposal per PI. However, folks can serve as team members on multiple proposals. So if you're a lead PI on a proposal or a co-PI, 1 per person. However, you can serve in that other role. Right. Finally, a question for Kara. Kara, can you please elaborate more on the required 10% cost share? Not quite sure about what that meant.
Yeah, so the 10% cost share that's required, it's not technically something we can track on our end to see if you've actually spent the cost share, but say you're awarded 100,000, 10% of that, the 10,000 will have to be from expense from your department. Like you will have to spend that much on top of the 10,000 to contribute to the project. I don't know if that.
So, yeah, Kara can just elaborate a little bit, because and give some examples, I think, from previous grants that might be helpful. So we say 10%, and it's 10% on top of the $100,000. So you can request up to $100,000 for tier 2, or up to $50,000 but for tier 1, but then on top of that, you would need to demonstrate the 10% of whatever funding you're requesting. On top of that, and it's automatically, Kara has set it up so it's automatically calculated in the budget template, is what you need to generate in cost share. Each institution must contribute something in cost share to the project. Cost share can be money. So, say a faculty or a department wants to contribute $1,000 cash to the project for travel or for supplies, etc. Great. But they could also be in-kind contributions We will count salary time as a contribution to cost share, but it needs to be clear in the budget, the percentage and how much is allocated to that. It could be venues for workshops. It could be catering for events. It could be local transportation for a visiting delegation. So those are some of the types of cost share we've had in the past. Justin, Derek, Abraham, other types of cost share that we've seen?
Equipment, oftentimes like lab space, or I've
Mhm.
seen, tech is oftentimes counted as cost share. I did also want to note, just while I'm thinking of it, that institutional cost share should be reflected in those letters of support. So it should be shown in the budget, as a monetary value, but that should also be demonstrated in those letters of support from each institution, just sort of laying out that, XYZ department or whatever is providing this for cost share, whether it's cash or in kind.
Yeah, we need to make sure that it's an institutional commitment to
Mhm.
that cost share. And yes, there's a question in the chat of is in-kind labor can be labor. Yes, that can be included in there as cost share. And again, I want to emphasize each partner that has a PI on the proposal needs to contribute at least some form of cost share. We did not specify how that could be divided up amongst partners because we know different partners bring different things to the table. And so we just asked that it appear equitable. That's part of the equity piece. Kara, others, anything else to add? Tony, anything else to add?
Just quick on that, the equitable part is really important to mention. I think, it doesn't have to be equal contribution, but equitable contribution according to the roles and responsibilities. Also, as Justin mentioned, with the cost share being in the letter of support as well, we do encourage you to have these conversations very early in order to bring in your administration. And so you fully understand your own institution's rules and regulations as it pertains to cost share, indirect costs, moving money even, intellectual property. What are some other issues? Those are the big ones. IRB approval, those kind of administrative processes. The teams should be aware of their own institution's requirements, essentially, because that could cause a big hurdle, big obstacle if those conversations are not had during the design phase.
Yes, we've seen that happen. There was another thing I wanted to mention. Oh, yeah, so the institutional cost contribution is a must. You must show at least 10% of the funds requested, 10% on top of the funds requested must be reflected in your budget. And again, there's a calculation. Kara set it up nicely that there's a calculation in there to tell you how much cost share you will be required given your requested funds, the amount of your requested funds.
All right, thank you all. Next question, can we have the slides in French? So for the PIRA, we are requiring all applications to be submitted in English, which is why we've chosen to do today's presentation exclusively in English. So just to note that any submissions must be in English. Typically, we try and be inclusive of our Francophone partners and have interpretation, but given that requirement for this grant program, we figured that made the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
Does PIRA allow a doctoral research project?
I should say, Justin,
Oh, yeah.
I want to just come back to that. We do encourage programs, and we do look favorably upon programs that do incorporate multilingual approach. And so collaboration amongst Francophone and Anglophone members, or bringing in a Lusophone member, not a member, sorry, Lusophone partner, then that is something that is encouraged. Working across on multilingual projects, and maybe Abraham, is there an element in our in the communications engagement like that would count towards that sort of translation interpretation would count towards that 10% required for communication, correct?
That is correct. Part of engagement, there is, engagement, ideally you have to think about how you translate your knowledge. And quite often it always leads to a point where you have, it gets to language. And I think that is something that should be considered, that stakeholders that are brought in could be exploring that as their contribution, or local partners could be exploring that. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Abraham. Does PIRA allow a doctoral research project? Any thoughts there?
We do encourage PIRA proposals to involve research, graduate student researchers broadly, I'll say. It could be undergraduate or graduate student researchers. We want to ensure that, you know, we would look favorably upon proposals that have multi levels of expertise. And so we encourage people to engage graduate students in a proposal. However, the proposal would need to be led by a researcher from that institution, a full-time, an employee of that institution. I know sometimes research assistants are employees, but typically we would look for a PI to be a faculty or academic staff member. Does that make sense? Is that fair assessment?
I think so, yeah.
Others? Okay.
What I've seen in other projects though is that the MPhil, or will be an output of the project, which I think can be encouraged. That when you do this, it will be great to see like the project has graduated a few students from its presence.
Right. If it could provide funding for a student to do their field research, for example, that would lead to their graduation, that would be great. We'd love that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. I've got another question, wanting to know more about salary and indirects, but I think we've covered that pretty thoroughly.
Well, just to say that indirect costs are not allowed. So this funding is coming from Michigan State University directly, and so is not an external funder external to MSU funding this project. So we are not allowed to include indirect costs on that on these budgets. And then salary, again, it's up to 30% of the budget can be in salary costs, and there can be additional salary that is cost share, contributed as cost share. So Antonio, let us know if you have additional clarification you would like to have for that.
All right, we've got another question from Chanel Foster. Are letters of commitment required from AAP institutions and others outside MSU, or does the letters of support from each institution serve that purpose?
So the requirement is a letter of support from each of the partners that has a PI on a program. Or I think each of the people that are engaged in the project itself, the project activity. So a letter of support would be required from each institution that is a part of the project, correct? Everyone on the same page with that, right? But then if you wanted, Abraham was mentioning additional letters of support. Maybe Abraham, you can chime in about how that would lend to the review of the application.
Yes, primarily you would have your institution, providing letters of support that we should know that they are involved. They know about the project that is, that is coming to their institution. That is the standard one. Now, when it comes to impact, we need letters of, it would be great to have letters from stakeholders or partners that you'd say you are partnering with on the project. Say if it's the government department that you have, it would be great to see a letter of support from a director or an individual from that department to show that indeed they are involved in such a project. If it's a civil society body or a private sector, it would be great to see that as support to support to the application. It strengthens your application. It gives us confidence that the project has some form of sustainability and there's buy-in in what you are providing as a solution.
Okay, thank you both. Is a small growing organization dealing with agriculture eligible for the consortium? Another membership question that we can hopefully address at the end here. What
Yeah,
a cultural sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, we'll talk about the membership question in a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. Would a cultural content creator for the required engagement component be best listed as a team member or as a subcontractor, non-employee on the budget? So this is kind of a combo question for Abraham and for Kara.
I'll start. I think this one is more like as a contractor for now, but it would be great if you had. It's not. I don't think it's an obligation. It would be great if you had them from the beginning. For that, it gives us trust that you have inclusion from your onset. But we will not be strict about having them as a contractor. I know that it could be a decision that you make once you have received the grant, that you decide to engage a contractor for the engagement component or communication component.
Abraham, could you give
Right.
an example of the Y'all Smart project and how they incorporated that sort of communications team from the beginning?
Yes.
I think that's a great example. And of course, because they have a communications team from the beginning, you can see a lot of their outputs on social media, etc. That they're a previous PIRA, they're a PIRA awardee from the last round, but go ahead.
Yes, indeed, Amy. Having diverse partners, including those who are in communication and engagement, strengthens your application in many ways. For example, if you have someone who thinks already of how to embed communication in your application, already your application would reach us with a strength that, and an expert would have gone through the eyes of an expert in that field. So it can only strengthen your case. And the example is what Amy just gave. There's a project between University of Botswana, MSU, and Botswana Local Enterprise that they co-applied for an engagement project, and a project which engagement was kind of incorporated from the onset, which meant that the researchers didn't have to mention the project they were doing in passing, but it had to be in detail. We would know what they are going to do exactly. And already, as a project reviewer, you'd get excited from seeing the type of results or anticipated results from that collaboration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Abraham.
Right. Anything else to add for that one, or are we good to move on? Okay. There are 2 grants announced, one for the group formation, the other for scaling up. Do we apply for the 2 together or one after the other? So this sounds like a question about our funding tiers.
Right. So Justin, you want to handle that?
Yes. So to be clear, the planning grants are up to 50,000. Scaling grants are up to 100,000. So those are 2 different tiers of funding within this same call for applications. So teams can either choose to apply to the smaller planning grants up to 50,000 if they're in that early stage of partnership, or if they are maybe a bit more established as a team and want to scale up their already existing work, then they can apply for a scaling grant up to 100,000. So teams can only apply to one tier or the other. It's not a multi-part thing. It's you choose which level of funding makes the most sense for your project.
Right. So if you're an early stage project and it doesn't make sense that you have the activities that would go up to $100,000, I encourage you to apply for the 50,000. I know, we see the 100,000, we're like, let's go for that. But I think that if it needs to make sense for your project and your partnership, the level that you apply for. And you can see from our previous calls the level of funding there. We do have a diversity of funding. We will be looking to fund some 50,000 and some 100,000. So we'll be looking at that as well to consider for funding. We cannot give all funding to $100,000 projects. We prefer not to. I mean, if we get no $50,000 projects that we can fund, we'll have to deal with that. But we prefer to give $50,000 and 100,000 projects at each of those tiers.
Thank you. Do we have any affiliations in Ghana? So none of our members are currently located in Ghana, though we do have several partners who have done work within the country, both at MSU and at our member institutions. So again, connecting with PIs from each, I'm sure you'll be able to find folks who have done work in Ghana. Please give us a list of member universities in Kenya. So we did share that list of AP consortium members earlier. It's also on our website if you missed the link. Another question about getting an MSU partner. We've answered that. Are partnerships from the same country allowed? I would say yes. I think just as long as, again, meeting the requirement of having an MSU partner along with an African member partner. But for example, you can partner with other organizations within Kenya, for example, while still meeting those eligibility requirements.
Yep.
Can teams be made up of one particular gender, or there has to be a proportion of representation?
We would look favorably on, as Derek, maybe you can talk to this because that's part of the review criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we would look favorably on projects that really show DEI is taken into consideration at all stages of the project, beginning with the project design and the partnership formulation. We have funded single gender teams in the past, but really we want to see, the main thing is seeing that DEI within the program and throughout the program.
All right. Another question about the funding tiers. Is there a cap on the number of grants awarded each year? For example, how many $50,000 grants and how many $100,000 grants?
Say that again, Justin. What is it?
So they want to know if there's a cap on the number of grants awarded. So how many 50,000 and how many 100,000?
Right. Well, we haven't decided specifically. It depends on how many quality proposals we receive within that. I believe our target is to fund, Kara, was the funding set aside is around $700,000, right?
Yeah, it was around 700,000. I don't know exactly how many of each, essentially, of the 50K,
Right.
but it was around the 700,000. Yeah.
Is what we have for the funding for this round. So we will divide that amongst teams that are proposing $50,000 and $100,000 programs. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Okay.
I will note in the call for proposals, we did say to ensure broad impact, more awards will be given at the planning grant level, which is 50,000, than at the scaling grant level at 100. So likely we will award more $50,000 grants than 100, but again, we don't have hard numbers on either. All right. Can links in the chat be included with a recorded webinar? Yes, I will do my best to capture everything that we've linked today. I know there's been a lot of conversation in the chat and the Q&A. I will capture those. We will also share a recording of today's session, and we will share the slides as a PDF on our website for reference. Surely student involvement becomes an output. This is framed as a question. So Derek, I guess I'll turn that one to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Student involvement would be an output. The change in that student's ability or capacity would be the outcome. If they were the participant, if they were the target of the intervention, essentially. But yes, them being involved simply is an input.
Great, thank you.
Or an output, I'm sorry.
Question from Primrose, will you share the recording after the meeting? Yes, we will definitely share the recording with everyone who registered, as well as post it on our website, so that will be accessible. Clarification, so the 10% contribution is the total for all institutions applying, right? In other words, MSU plus outside AAP partner contribution equals 10% of the total budget requested.
I think on each tab for the MSU partner and then the other country partner would be 10% each shown in the budget, unless there was another specified amount. Amy, do you know of if it was?
So-
I know each of them have the 10% total at the bottom to show.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Right. So to clarify, to say in simple terms, so I'm sorry, are they asking, and this is Leo, okay. Are they asking, so everything total is 10% of what is requested, right? And that it goes on top of the funding that was requested. Is that the question?
yeah, I think they're trying to ask if it's 10% of the total budget or if it's 10% of MSU plus the outside partners, each 10%.
Contribution.
Right.
So it is the 10% of the funding that is requested from AAP.
Right.
Hopefully that's clear.
Yeah.
And so you can see that in the, oh, Abraham must have cut out somehow. You can see that in the template, there are those different lines for cost share for what's requested from AAP and then the total,
Mhm.
right, Kara?
Yep, it has it for, yep, each.
Okay. Great.
Okay, thank you. Can the project fund more than one proposal in a particular country?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yes. Mhm.
All right,
Definitely.
short and sweet. Can a center director at ISP whose tenure is outside ISP apply as a lead PI? Can one of the partners from AAP consortium apply as a lead PI?
So thanks, Shoma, for this question, and I was supposed to get back to her on this, but yes, the AAP directors discussed, and center director at ISP would not be eligible to be a PI for the program, but would be could be on the team for the program. So we would need some sort of MSU PI from outside of ISP, but that they could play a substantive role as a team member. Can one of the partners from AAP consortium apply as lead PI? Yes, we actually encourage co-PIs. And so we don't typically, I mean, one thing I think we should note to be transparent is that the funding is coming from MSU, so would go to the MSU department. The funding would be transferred to the MSU department here, and there would need to be a fiscal officer at MSU to manage that because of the transfer process, and this is internal MSU funding. However, then that funding can be transferred to the other institutions, and we hope in an equitable manner would be done. It would be done that way, and Kara can support, and our ISP fiscal officers can support MSU fiscal officers through that process. I don't know, Kara, if you want to say anything more about that.
Yeah, I think usually I know the last round, it was us transferring the funded amount to the department, and then the department, depending on if they have any outside partners, they would transfer the funds there. As far as at the end of the project, returning funds would be necessary for the partner to return the funds back to the home department and then return back to us, or to directly us if possible.
But in terms of the issue around a lead PI, we encourage sort of co-leadership of the project. So while the fiscal side, because of our mechanisms, is works through the MSU PI, we are hoping that there are co-equal PIs from across the team.
All right. Couple more questions. I know we are running over on time, so we will try and wrap up quickly. We are almost through our questions here. How can we connect with the PI from MSU? Again, since it's been a little while since we've touched on this, there are a number of ways of connecting with folks from MSU. AAP Bridge is one. We definitely encourage folks to check out aapbridge.com, and you can connect with people at MSU as well as from across the consortium there. We would also encourage, if you're looking for folks in a specific research area, like for example, in your question, you listed vaccine research. The MSU website is a wonderful resource for this type of thing. Different departments list their faculty as well as their research interests. They also have contact information on there, so you can reach out to folks directly. You can also provide AAP with maybe a couple of names of potential partners that you want to work with, and we would be happy to facilitate an introduction via email for you. So those are probably your best bets for connecting with a PI from MSU.
Question, I wanted to answer the question then, Justin, around membership.
Can we get through one more question and then we can go to
Sure.
that? Okay.
Yep.
Can AAP help with identifying a partner? Should the research focus be interdisciplinary, or can the team be from the same field? So two-part question. First part, I just mentioned connecting with PIs at MSU. Again, there's also the list of focal points on our website who can connect you directly with faculty at our member institutions. So that should answer the first part of your question. Second part is, should the research focus be interdisciplinary, or can the team be from the same field? Amy or Derek or anyone want to take a...
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I was...
Sure, yeah. Should the research focus be interdisciplinary, or can the team be from the same field?
The team can be from the same field. That's okay.
Yes.
We do encourage interdisciplinary work and transdisciplinary work. We know that if you're tackling an issue or a problem, that often strengthens the approach. So we do look favorably on creative use of transdisciplinary work, but it can be from the same discipline. Tony, any additions to add there? I want to give him, he hasn't had time to chime in on any of these, so.
I mean, no, nothing at this point.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure you had a chance to chime in, Tony.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, then I think that is it for the questions in the Q&A. So Amy, I will turn it over to you to discuss membership.
Sure. So I wanted to just state that we are sort of in a holding pattern with our membership. We just finished a 5-year strategic plan, and are in the process of starting to implement that. Part of that is looking at expansion of AAP, but we are not accepting new members at this time. And so that is something for future discussion. We, of course, can work with, and as we said, work with other partners outside of our consortium to on these projects, and they can be engaged in this work. But as we are sort of revisiting our membership criteria and our membership contributions, we are in a holding pattern with that for now. Jose, are you in a place where you can just add anything to that? And she might not be, that's okay.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I was not feeling very well earlier. I think you've answered the question, Amy. We are in a holding space right now. We're looking at our guidelines, and we'll be finalizing those in a few weeks or months, actually.
Actually, months, yeah.
I think months is a more accurate timeline, but yeah, I think you've answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I know we are over time, and I do not want to hold folks up any longer. So I think this is a good place to wrap it up. Amy, any final words from you? Abraham, anyone else?
I'll give Abraham and then I'll wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have much to say except that I really encourage colleagues to think about how they can translate their ideas and to think about really becoming co-creative and exploring creative ways to express their project. It's always interesting to have a diversity, teams made up of people who think differently. It kind of brings ideas to be expressed in a different and unique approaches. And I just encourage colleagues to think about that, and good luck to everyone who'll be applying. And we are here to support your applications. Thank you.
Thanks, Abraham. I think that was a great wrap up. I'll just say we are very much looking forward to your submissions. We know that there's a lot of creative and exciting ideas out there and exciting work being done. And so we are very excited to learn more about the work that you're doing through this program. We are here to support your proposal, as Abraham said. If there are additional questions, please feel free to reach out. aap@msu.edu is the easiest way to get a hold of someone, and that's the easiest email address to remember. Good luck on your proposal development.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.